This place has all of the natural gifts that we needed as a people to sustain ourselves. And of all the locations within our historical territory, including the Patapsco River watershed, the Patuxent River watershed, and here on the Potomac, this has everything we ever needed or wanted as a people to thrive. It has abundant sources of fish in our waterways. For the natural world, these types of freshwater marshes serves as a nursery for many different species of animals, both reptiles as well as fish. And you can still see their young ones born this last season as they are making their ways and growing until the tide gets strong enough and they get big enough to go out into the river itself. And from a tribal perspective, these freshwater marshes also serve as a breadbasket, as a kitchen, as a source of a wide variety of plants that we could gather to be able to sustain ourselves as well as for medicine. It's one of those subtle types of things that when you're walking in an area like this, you need to take 2 steps and stop and look, because there's so much life and activity moving around you that's unseen as you're walking by on a normal stroll. It has a lot of fertile, flat farmland for growing crops. It has many freshwater marshes to be able to harvest a wide variety of natural plants, as well as wild rice and tuckahoe and pickerelweed that the people use to sustain themselves throughout the years. It has pottery. We have the natural clay here to make pottery. We have the forest that we use to plant different trees, nut-bearing trees and fruit-bearing trees in little groves all around the region that over the decades, they will be able to provide food on a reoccurring basis to the community throughout the various seasons. Along the edges of our farm fields, there was a wide variety of berries being available to us. So all of this area together combined provided that natural capability to sustain our community. And even beyond that, this was considered our front door to our tribe. As you go up the river about 10 to 12 miles, you come to the Anacostia. And off to the west is the Potomac that goes up towards Great Falls. Great Falls was viewed as our front door, in which the tribes from the Ohio River Valley, tribes from Western Pennsylvania, the tribes from Western New York would utilize the Potomac as their way of coming to visit with us and to trade. Our culture is very much influenced by the landscape. When you look at the Mid-Atlantic region, we have the Appalachian Mountains to our west. There are only 2 easy ways of getting around or through the Appalachian Mountains. One is to our south, down to what's called the Cumberland Gap, which is down where North Carolina, Tennessee all sort of come together. The only other easy passage is here on the Potomac. As you go up to the North Fork of Potomac, there's a short land bridge just west of Cumberland that takes you over the mountains to the Youghiogheny. The Youghiogheny River then empties into Pittsburgh today and helps forms the Ohio River. And the Ohio opens up all of the middle west states all the way down to the Mississippi, or you can take the Allegheny River from Pittsburgh north, and that opens up all of Western Pennsylvania to New York, as well as the Great Lakes. So it was, based upon geography, we were that pass-through for the other tribes. So the tribes to our east, the Nanticoke on the eastern shore, if they wanted some of the trade goods, they would come through us. Virginia neighbors along the James River, the Powhatan River, the Rappahannock River, they would come to us and be that source of trade. As a hub and spoke concept. We were the hub, and all these various communities to our east and to our south would bring their trade goods to us, and then we would trade it on to the tribes to the west. We were taught by our elders, who were many now our ancestors, that we are a part of the natural world. We're not above it. We don't have domain over it. We are a part of it. When our ancestors die and they return back into the earth, and their bones become immersed with the roots of the trees and the plants. And those trees and the plants provide us with clean air. They provide us with food. They provide us with building materials. So they are an integral part of our life still in their current form as plants or trees. We see ourselves as having the responsibility to advocate for the lands, for the waters, for the animals. That's the gift that's given to us by the Creator. So it's our responsibility to advocate for them because they are a part of us. The shad was a very important part of our culture. In today's terms, we often hear about the Plains Indigenous people relying upon the buffalo as being a major food source. For us, the shad was that similar major source of food. The shad has a life cycle of spending most of their winter months out in the Atlantic Ocean in a place called the Sargasso Sea. And when the spring comes, about the March time frame, they come back into our waterways to begin to spawn. We are fortunate in this area here specifically. There's a spawning grounds just a few hundred yards downriver, and a spawning grounds right up here at the mouth of Piscataway Creek upriver. And in those spawning grounds, the shad lays their eggs, and their young will stay there in that region for 4 years. Whereas the adults will eventually later on in the calendar year go back out to the ocean in the Atlantic, the youth, they'll stay here for 4 years. So during that 4-year cycle, we always know that we have a food source in harvesting the shad close by. And we have tribal legends that talk about how the shad had so many bones. But the key to that story is it was a major food source that was always readily available. The colonists, when they came in, they observed how abundant the shad was in our waterways. And a place like George Washington's Mount Vernon plantation, one of their first businesses was in the commercial fishery industries. So what we were able to pass down from the idea of oral histories is validated in the colonial record by the business line and the business interests of some of the earlier plantation owners of the American colony.
So when the Colonials settled after that, how did that affect our ancestors?
It was quite significant. Initially, from the period of the 1700s on, for those of us who we are descended from, they had to find a new way to blend in to the colonial world. And one of the ways they did that was to adopt the colonial style of housing. Very similar to the house we just left, that 1 or 2 bedroom structure in which our families would live there and begin to farm the land, very similar to the colonial style. It was no longer just the female gender role. It was both the male and the female out there working the gardens, working the crops, working the animals as a new way of life for our people. There's also some stories in the early years, the 1630-40 time frame, in which that human nature role comes through. The leadership wanted a colonial style home. We all were very comfortable for centuries in our longhouse structure, but now there was something new. And that human nature who wanted something new, they were asked that our Tayak, our chief, was asking the colonists to come and build him a home in their style, just to have that look of something different.
With all the farming and the agricultural practices that the colonists brought with them, that had a big dramatic effect on the landscape and the waterways.
Quite significant. They did not understand the relationship between lands and waters. And when the colonists started to farm those village sites, they would come in and with their plows and discs and tear up the land, destroy the root structure right up against the waterways. And when the rains came, the rains washed silt into the land, topsoil off the land into the waterways. When the snows come, the snow would drain the topsoil into the waterways that caused that siltation. When the winds blew heavily, it would also push that topsoil into the waterways. So after a period of decades, which was once deep waters, are now getting to the point of 8 and 10 feet deep because of the siltation. At the same time, that destroys the land as far as being productive for growing crops, but it also destroys all the life forms at the bottom of those waterways. But that's the beauty of a place like this today. Here in this park, Piscataway Park, we have a chance to walk the same trails that our ancestors once walked. We're able to see the trees and the plants and the animals that our ancestors once saw. And we're able to have that direct linkage from between generations, between centuries, as part of that story. So it's always a great experience to come back here, to smell the cedar, to be able to see the natural world untouched at a place that is so important to us. Many of the tribes along Turtle Island, especially here in the east, were forced away from their homelands, and they don't have that direct relationship anymore. They ended up in places like Oklahoma and Kansas. We were given that gift by going underground and surviving in isolation communities to be able to still see and touch and be a part of that natural world that our ancestors called home for over 15,000 years. I guess the other sort of amazing thing is that because of George Washington choosing this location to build his Mount Vernon plantation across the river, this area has been protected. We would not be walking on this land if it wasn't for that Mount Vernon location and them protecting the view shed. So there is a lot of American history here, a lot of tribal history here, and it has been preserved not by intent, but I think by accident or by a spiritual guide that has looked at the bigger picture than what we would have thought 30, 40, 50, 80, 100 years ago.
Yeah.